Oda, only on Bloomberg Quint.
All right, welcome back. You're still with us right here on Countdown. 27 minutes left to go for market closing. The Nifty 50, that's up about 80 odd points right now, holding on to those gains there. We were talking about Reliance Infrastructure right before we hit the break, and the stock move of about 14 odd percent. I think the rest of the pack, if you take a look at Reliance Power, Reliance Capital, to see whether or not there has been any sort of an impact on any of the other names as well. So Reliance Power, though, is also up about 6.5 odd percent. Reliance Capital, another 6% as well. Mayuresh, probably, if you would like to comment on Reliance Infra, they're talking about finding a resolution ahead of the 180-day period that they've been given, and they're claiming to be a debt-free company by 2020. Would you have a call at all on Reliance Infra and any of the other ADAG group stocks?
No coverage at all. And again, I think a large element in terms of the actionables actually happening on the balance sheet is going to be very, very critical from a street perspective. So all the moves that are expected or planned, I think once they start getting monetized, I think that is when the street will probably get a little bit more excited, because even if you look at the consolidated debt for the group as a whole, in excess of 52,000 crore. So I think a lot more deleveraging probably needs to be done to probably repair all the damage that has been done, and all that has been going on in terms of auditor resignation, so on and so forth. So no view at this point of time. I think we are still better off looking at select private banks, select NBFCs, a few road infrastructure companies, and select mid-cap cement stocks.
Okay, Mayuresh, just squeezing in one last question. The media stocks are doing well. We had the numbers of GTPL Hathway coming out, and the stocks locked in upper circuit. And I guess this was the first full quarter impact seen where subscription revenue were also up about 47%. This was the first full quarter where new tariff order impact was seen. We've seen the run up in a lot of other media stocks today. I think Den's also moved higher. That's trading with gains of about 11-12%. Dish TV is also sitting with gains of 12%. In light of just what GTPL Hathway has posted, any thoughts on the entire media space?
No, so I think the new tariff orders did impact the initial part of revenues. But again, I think as the stability starts coming through, both in terms of the subscription revenues and the subscription growth thereof, I think you're going to see far more stable earnings profile. Now, what the company reported, I think, were phenomenal set of numbers. But I think whether they get replicated or repeated by the other companies, I think it has to be a very granular approach on a company-to-company basis at this point of time. So again, I think expectations of the new tariff order implementation slowly should start playing out in terms of better subscription numbers and growth as well on that aspect. But again, I think one really needs to be very, very selective. So as we've always discussed, I think I still continue holding Z in my portfolio, assuming a better deal and a better deal dynamics going through in favor for the enterprise valuations for the company as a whole. So that's a clear disclaimer from my side.
Okay, and Z today is the top gainer on Nifty. Mayuresh, we'll let you go on that note. Thanks a lot for joining and taking us through your views on the markets. All right, let's go across to Mishika Parekh to find out which are the Fab4 stocks that she's tracking today. Hi, Mishika. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Navneet. So the first stock on my list of Fab4 today is GTPL Hathway. On the back of very good results, the stock has gained as much as 20%. The net profits up 123%, EBITDA is up 37%. The new tariff order led to significant growth in subscription revenues, which grew by around 47% year on year. The next stock that we're looking at is IndusInd Bank. The stock gains ahead of its results tomorrow, as numbers of Bharat Financials will be consolidated this time around, and the street is expecting strong numbers. Stock number 3 is Cadila Healthcare. HSBC maintains a buy on this stock and believes that the recent sell-off largely factors in all the negatives. Also, HSBC is bullish on the US and India sales recovering. Last stock on my list today is Aurobindo Pharma. The company has launched this tablet called Sinacalcet hydrochloride in the USA, and these tablets had a sales worth approximately $1.5 billion. Back to you, Navneet.
Thanks, Nishika, for bringing those Fab 4 stocks of the day. And just shifting focus back to markets, we're still sustaining the gains, by the way, which we've seen throughout the session. So that's one positive news. 11,587 for the index. Sachtanand, before we let you go and thank you, any BTSD or any STBT for tomorrow's session that you have for our viewers?
Well, on the STBT side, I think BHAL looks relatively weak. In fact, 65 levels have been is about to be breached. So this is where some more downside is left. I think 63.50 would be the target for this particular trade. The stop loss should be placed at around 66.
All right, we'll let you go on that note. Thank you so very much for joining us, Sachidanand, with your picks. Rahul Mohinder of Veratex Software, he's joining us on the show right now. Rahul, thanks very much for taking out the time. Nifty, quite a few erratic moves over the last few trading sessions, difficult to gauge even from a trader standpoint. But probably from a near-term perspective, would you go long at these current levels? It has taken support at its 100-day moving average and moved up from there. But is the trend looking sustainable enough for you to actually go long?
No, I think you hit the nail on the bud. When you come to key averages, be it the 100-day or the 200-day, we are definitely well above it. People are getting worried that has the long-term outlook on the Nifty changed? Have we topped out? And, I'm consistently maintaining that's not happened. What we saw, what we witnessed from levels of 12,100 odd down to this 11,400 mark is, broadly speaking, a large correction. And I would treat it more as a shorter-term correction. So 11,450 is the key support level below which I would change tact and trend on the Nifty spot. So if we break 11,450, only then would we put out a negative rating on the Nifty. At this point, since we're near that support level, no harm if you went long. Remember, the oscillation could go as high as about 11,800. But the follow-through aspect is what we really need to wait and watch for. But for now, we have a neutral stand, 11,800 being the resistance, 11,450 being a very key support.
Okay, that's on the Nifty. What about the Bank Nifty? I mean, it definitely looks like it could face some resistance closer to the approach towards 31,000.
Absolutely. I think if you see, largely the Bank Nifty has also been very range bound. I mean, all the way from mid-May, we've kind of maintained 30,200 broadly speaking. So my whole assessment is the fact that, we are still holding the supports. Let's not panic. Individually, stocks are definitely doing well within the Bank Nifty. So keeping 30,200 as a support in mind, one should still hang in there. Again, will we follow through in the very short term? I think we're close to a strong resistance of 30,800. We're almost there. If we can break out this level of 3,800 on a close and sustain above it, I think that will give us the next fillip. But overall, if you look at the medium to long-term structure on both the indices, the Nifty and the Bank Nifty, we're still steady. There's nothing to panic at this point.
Two stocks, Biocon, HDFC. Why do you like them?
Biocon, we've been noticing that the stocks really had a good volume build up. And, from these levels, even if you look at the price action on Biocon, we've had a nice price rise with an increase in volume too. Stocks actually collapsed quite a bit over the last 6 months. So strong support at 240 odd levels. So we're looking at a short-term trade to start with, 262 being a target, 246 could be a stop loss on it. But again, I'd probably say that you need to have a slightly longer term vision. If you can hang on to Biocon from, and take a new entry at this level, you could go as high as 285 to 290. So it really depends on your time factor. If it's short term, then 262 is a reasonable target. HDFC Limited, again, index heavyweight, we're fairly bullish on long term. Short term targets on this is 2350. I buy in with a stop loss of 2210. So, the little intraday correction we're seeing now could be utilized as a buying opportunity.
Okay, those are two buy calls coming in from Rahul on HDFC as well as Biocon. Looking at some of Nifty gainers today, and JSW Steel has been up and about right from the word go in the morning. In fact, steel stocks opened higher, but this one sustained the gains and currently sitting at the day's high. 267 right now in JSW Steel. Rahul, are you convinced with the move if someone were to take a fresh bet here?
It's a tough call on JSW. I mean, there are two ways to approach the stock. Number one, you could look at the fact that the stock has declined to a very strong degree. If you look at the last 6 months or 1 year, for that matter, in terms of performance, we're at a very strong support level. But long term, we do not have a breakout. Medium term, we still do not have a breakout. My own hunch is we probably will see lower levels of 240 to 245 come in. I would read today's up move as nothing but some kind of short covering. And what Warren said is the fact that when you start looking at even the volume numbers, it's not good enough. Yes, it's well above average, but too early to say. So 270, 272 could once again be strong resistance on JSW Steel. So a little early to call this a breakout as yet.
Okay, Rahul, a sharp recovery has been seen in Indigo from the lows of the day. And for the second day in the running, it's protected that 1300 mark on the closing basis. If someone is still sitting in short positions on Interglobe Aviation, what would you advise?
I think with all the news and turmoil, it always becomes a little tough. But technically speaking, we have very strong support at 1340. We breached those levels yesterday and today, but that was more intraday as a breach. So we haven't really broken the key support of 1350. What I do is, if the market, if Indigo starts closing below levels of say 1340, 1330, I would definitely cut, a long position. If you're already short, I would say that this is a good point to cover and take stock of things all over again. So it's a very important level we're at. I'd wait for 1330 to break down on a closing basis before estimating that a new downtrend is in force.
Okay. Stay on with us, Rahul. Lots more to discuss, but it's time now to take a look at what dealing rooms are recommending this afternoon. Darshan Mehta, he's here with his channel checks. Darshan, good afternoon.
Yeah, so good afternoon, Devina. One of the stocks that's been spoken about actively, and that is IndusInd Bank. Remember, the results are there tomorrow. The street anticipates a strong set of numbers. Over the past few days, you've seen the stock has rallied significantly from levels of 1480. It's moved all the way to 1550 currently, and it's moved on decent volumes. Almost 4 million shares have been traded. So that's the first one. The other counter which has moved up today is BEML. It's up almost 8%. Some of the domestic funds are accumulating, and the main reason is because what's happening as far as the Karnataka election is concerned. Remember, the current government opposed the divestment of BEML, which the government wanted to do. BEML had actually corrected all the 50% from the all-time high because of the stake sale which didn't go through. So with the anticipation of what's going on in the Karnataka election, and probably with a change in government, they anticipate the stake sale probably will happen, and that's why BEML is up in trade. And finally, the last stock that dealers are talking about is Indigo. Is down 3.5%, has come up from the day's low, but dealers indicate that HNIs are now accumulating the counter at lower levels. It's fallen almost 15% from the highs, so from the last 2 days. So there is a little bit of accumulation that's happening.
Okay, Darshan, thanks a lot for bringing that dealing room check. So keep an eye on all these stocks for tomorrow's trade as well. Investec came out with a note on the NBFC space post the budget. It believes that it had no action plan to rescue stressed NBFCs and real estate companies. Let's discuss this in greater detail with Nidesh Jain, research analyst at Investec Capital Services. Hi Nidesh, good afternoon, and thanks a lot for joining us today. Tell us your major takeaways from the budget with regard to the announcement made for the NBFC space.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on your television. So, couple of things. Firstly, I think this is the first time in budget where finance minister mentioned NBFC as a word maximum number of times. I have not seen mention of NBFC so much time in any budget in last 7-8 years. So they definitely understand issues in the NBFC sector. Having said that, the announcement that they have made, I think largely they were optical in nature. They were clearly not in a position or not willing to rescue any of the NBFC which are under stress. So which in my view is also a right strategy. I think some of the NBFCs which are under stress for right reasons, and the government should not come out and rescue these NBFCs. It will create a moral hazard. Though there will be volatility in the short term, I think that's the right approach towards that. And they clearly articulated, and the steps that they have taken are likely to favor the stronger NBFCs. So some of the steps like providing credit enhancement providing credit guarantee is likely to benefit only the large and strong NBFCs. I think that the budget is pretty in the right direction, but there is no action plan to rescue any of the troubled NBFCs, and which will have volatility in the short term, but it's positive for the long term perspective.
Nidesh, you did mention that the better quality NBFCs could gain out of this, and whatever is happening in the NBFC space, of course, owing to that, the liquidity crisis, the competition will shrink, which would also mean market share for good quality NBFCs would move higher. In light of that, which are those NBFCs where Investec is currently bullish on?
So we are fairly bullish on Cholamandalam Investment Finance Company, CIFC. They are operating in two segments, vehicle finance and home equity, which is also called as LAP. And in both of these segments, they have witnessed substantial reduction in competitive intensity. We have done channel checks on different parts of India, and we have found that they are gaining market share in both vehicle finance as well as in home equity. In home equity, large housing finance companies, the likes of Diwan and Indiabulls, are facing liquidity issues. Because of that, Chola is gaining market share there, and they are able to command their own terms, both on the risk side as well as on the pricing front. Similarly, on the vehicle finance side, some of the NBFCs are not disbursing as much as they were disbursing earlier, primarily on the used CV side, on two-wheeler side, and there again, Chola is gaining market share. So despite a very weak vehicle sales growth, I believe the company is expected to grow at 20% plus even in the current quarter, and which will be one of the strongest performance in the NBFC sector. So that is our preferred pick. Among housing finance companies, we believe budget was very positive for affordable housing finance companies, the companies which are operating at the lower end of ticket size. Given there is an additional tax incentive for loans up to for purchasing of house up to 45 lakh category. And there we are very bullish on Canfin Home Finance, which is likely to benefit the most from that step in the budget. A large part of their book is operating in affordable housing finance segment. Their average ticket size of loan is 18 lakh. They have no exposure to developer. So these are the two NBFCs that we are bullish on in the current environment.
Okay. Nidesh, no mention of the gold finance companies. Any thoughts on Muthoot and Manappuram, which have actually weathered the storm quite well since the time liquidity crisis started in September last year? We've seen good returns from both of them, considering the shorter term tenor loans that they've been offering, and also the collateral value is moving higher because of higher gold prices now.
Yeah. So from short-term perspective, these two companies look pretty interesting, primarily because the gold price have been inching up, and has inched up in last 1 year. If you look at last 4-5 years, they have been struggling primarily on the growth front. After the RBI guidelines on LTV of gold loans, these companies were struggling on the growth front, and this year specifically, given the gold price has moved upwards, there are expectations that they will be able to grow at a faster pace. Given the short tenure of the book, there was no ALM mismatch on their balance sheet, and they were not facing liquidity issues. Lenders were happy to finance these two companies. But I think from a longer term perspective, the large part of growth as well as capital allocation has to come from the new businesses that they are entering into. For example, Manappuram has entered into microfinance, home finance, vehicle finance. And there, as of now, we are not very positive on these companies' ability to enter into these new segments and create a strong, viable business model out of that. So we are actually in process of doing work on more on these companies, and as of now, we don't have any firm view on both of these companies.
All right, Nidesh, we'll let you go on that note. Thank you so very much for joining in with your views on what happens to NBFCs here on. Rahul, is there a likely trade on any of these NBFCs? Probably, if you look at the gold finance companies or the housing finance companies, put them into separate buckets and then see whether or not trade exists there?
I think I concur with the view that when you look at the short-term outlook on a Muthoot or a Manappuram, they still look very promising. For example, Muthoot I was looking at very strong supports on this stock at 595 odd levels. We've been holding those levels right through from mid-May. So, at the current value of around 615, 620, I think it still warrants a hold, if not a buy. I think the stock is poised for new highs about 670. So a reasonably decent trade there. Even for that matter, on Manappuram, we're still positive on the stock. So if you're looking at the next 5 to 8%, I firmly believe these stocks would move up. But I think it's a bit of a cloudy future from there on. So it's really a short-term call that I'm making here again.
What would be your closing idea for today, Rahul?
I've been looking at a couple of stocks, amongst the Nifty heavyweights as well. The first one that caught my eye was something like an SBI. I think this is a stock which one could buy on and hold through. So we're looking at buying at the current levels of 63, 64. We think that SBI should be moving to newer highs, and one should expect levels of 378, 380 to come in over the next 2 or 3 trading sessions. So a bullish call on the banks, mostly speaking. Amongst the heavyweights, what we really wanted to see today was if we could have a stock of like Reliance, get past 1300. That's not happened. But I think, as traders, as market gaugers, we should all keep this in mind that, if a Reliance can get past 1300 and, an HDFC Limited that we like is looking in good stealth, or an SBI is looking in good stealth, it's all pointing to the fact that the index will trot forward to about 11800. So I'd say the market is closing at a very healthy note.
I just want to take a look at Syndicate Bank also, since we were talking about SBI. This is one stock over the last few days has been active, but suddenly has seen a sharp drop in today's session. So 4% in just, I think, over a minute ago, the stock was trading 40 plus, and now it's dropped about 4.5%. However, in the last 1 month, it's not been bad, because the stock from levels of about 34 has graduated to about these 40 levels. What would you do, Rahul, with this particular stock if you have it in your portfolio?
See, I think it's more of a hold, but at the same time, I have to admit that the stock has really been dwindling. I mean, after making that all-time low of 30 rupees odd, we've really held 30, 31 as that strong long-term support. And, on the top, we've not had a single weekly close above a level of 42, 43. So I think we're really stuck in range. I mean, there's this whole range on the stock. At the same time, I would say this is definitely not a point where you want to short something like this. So I'd use declines to buy, on the stock. Yet my expectation level would be more with a 6 month to a 1 year horizon. I do not expect magic over the next 1 or 2 weeks.
Okay, that's Syndicate Bank. Just want to mark a couple of stocks. Pull up Himmat Singha's seed. The counter touched 52-week low of 147, but just in the last 10 to 15 minutes, there's been a sharp rebound from the lows of the day, currently at 170, sitting with gains of about 13%. Incremental gains seen for the media stocks. Remember, the Nifty Media Index is also a top sectoral gainer. Dish TV is now up about 17 to 18%. Den Networks has also seen gains of about closer to 12%. And my producer just highlighted BEML. I think that's the other counter which is seeing strong gains in today's trade. That's up about 7%. Rahul, among any of these stocks, BEML or the media stocks, is anything looking attractive on the charts?
Of all the names, finally Dish TV comes up on my radar, and that clearly happened today because of the fact that today's volume, today's daily volume seems to be the highest in the last 5 or 6 months. So definitely there's a volume flag on it, a very good price move accompanied with volume. So my hunch is you will follow through. Next resistance on Dish TV is at 33.50, but we have price targets set out on this one to about 44 odd levels. So we definitely think there is some headway here. So keeping a stop loss of 28, I'd recommend a buy. It's a bit of an aggressive call, but I think worth taking, looking at the risk is to reward.
Then would you also trade Z on the upside? It's up 7% now.
Not really. We are not great fans of entering the stock at these levels. And again, if you look at multiple technical factors, we still don't see that that volume. The last 2 months has been very tepid on volumes. Price-wise, we've just kind of hung around 325. I think I'm looking for bigger signs here. We still don't have a positive weekly chart on Z. So I think I'd still wait on before making a call here. But again, at this point, any trader should keep in mind that the level of 325, 330 is very solid long-term support on the stock. One should exit if at all these levels break.
All right, that's a word coming in on Dish TV and on Z. Let's quickly start wrapping up the market to see where we are closing in on this weekly options day. It's a good close, so more than 0.5% on the Nifty 50. It bounced back from the 100-day moving average where it took support. I think 11,499 was where the 100-day moving average was at. 11,575 for Nifty. For Sensex, another 238 odd points added, and contribution, good enough contribution. I wouldn't say outperformance, but it probably tallied in line with what the rest of the broader markets did for the Bank Nifty. For the small cap and the mid cap index, mid caps did well, small caps not all that much, but still having a positive close with gains of about 1/3%. Mid caps doing slightly better in line with what the benchmark index did. Taking a look at the individual contributors then on the Nifty 50, Z, the big push that came in today's session, 6.5% higher. You've seen peripheral effect on Dish TV as well as to what Z did today. JSW Steel picked up some steam today, 5% higher. Hero MotoCorp and the rest of the auto pack, the entire auto basket actually has done well today. Hero MotoCorp 4.5% higher. You've got Tata Motors 3.5% higher. Bajaj Auto though was the only one in the morning session that did not open in the green and probably is closing in the red too. Hindalco 2.5% higher, Vedanta 2.5% higher, and Dr. Reddy, some news with Amneal, and the stock has moved up about 2.5%. SBI also doing well. Amongst the losers, there you have it. I think Bajaj Auto is here about 1% under. Tech Mahindra is lost about 1.33%. ICICI Bank, UPL, Axis Bank, TCS, Sekedeo, not Trot. But the cuts this time are not as exaggerated, even though there was a slight miss on the numbers. Titan continues to grind a bit lower today as well. L&T, muted performance, and Britannia looks weak by about 0.2%. But what's happening in the broader universe of stocks, Navneet, I guess it's more mixed bag. Stocks, moving up as well.
That's right, Davina. We have more, both, in fact, movers as well as on the upside and also on the downside. Let me start off with the gainers. GTPL Hathway company, which reported its numbers yesterday, and the stock reacted to that. Going home with upper circuit gains of 20%. Remember, this was the first quarter which saw the full impact of the new tariff order, and the subscriptions for this quarter grew by about 47%. And the rub-off effects seen for the entire media pack. You also had Dish TV as well as 10 networks. Both these stocks registered good gains. Dish TV closing with gains of about 16%, Den Network closing with about 12% gains. The other gainers were Indoco Remedies. This counter also saw buying interest, and that's closing with gains of about 10 to 10.5%. You also had Religare, which was locked in upper circuit with gains of 10%. We did speak to the management on their divestment plan with regard to Religare Finvest to TCG Advisors. Reliance Infra was the other one, which the company came out with a release and informed the stock exchanges that the ICA has been signed 11% higher. The bump up that you see in the intraday trade came after that release. Bharat Forge and Himmat Singha Seed are the other two counters which saw buying interest. Bharat Forge closing with gains of about 5%, and Himmat Singha Seed, interestingly, the counter touched 52-week low of 147, and then there was some buying seen, at least in the last half an hour of 45 minutes. You saw those gains coming by, up about 13%. On the losing side, NMDC, which was up and about yesterday ahead of the Karnataka High Court verdict for the Donimalai mines, which was in favor of the company, but today it seemed there was some profit booking in the counter. Indigo, second straight day, the counter saw losses, but it did recover on the intraday basis. The lows were somewhere about 1270, and it has recovered almost 70 to 80 points from the lows, but it's still closing with cuts of about 3%. Bata, fifth day in the running, the counter is down, and significant amount of short positions that were seen for this one. On the future side, Graphite and HEG, the graphite makers, were down in today's trade. Selling pressure was seen there, 7% lower for Graphite, and HEG also saw cuts of about closer to 7.5%. And Birlasoft, this counter has been witnessing intense selling in the last 5 sessions. In fact, last 5 trading days, it's seen cuts of about between 18 to 19%. And today also the stock was down nearly 3% in trade, Davina.
All right, so the close has been positive on all counts, even the broader market space contributing today. So Nifty Bank closes with the gains of about 0.5%. Following that, Nifty 50, another 0.75% closer to that, inching towards 11,600. Sensex also up about closer to 1% apiece. What contributed to the Nifty 50 gaining this 0.7% was HDFC Bank. The banking stocks doing well. HDFC Bank, SBI contributed 8 points, and IndusInd Bank another 7 points. Losing out, actually, it looks like the banks were on either side. ICICI Bank and Axis Bank lost out, and I think some of the auto names and metal names also amongst the others looked weak in today's session.
That's right, and let's also check how the market breadth panned out in today's trade. We did see gains coming in for the broader market indices as well. We started off with more advances to declines, and probably mid-session there was some bit of selling pressure seen with regard to broader markets, but we're ending the day in favor of the advances. And with regard to participation, considering today was the weekly options expiry day, so you would see the derivatives turnover to be higher, 19.5 lakh crore, though we've seen higher turnovers on such days. And the cash turnover, Devina, has been, I think, sub 30,000 crore now.
For the last few days, actually.
Yeah.
So we've not really pushed ourselves back towards that 30,000 mark. Nonetheless, getting quick closing comments from Rahul Mohinder, who's here with us. Rahul, what would the approach be? I mean, we're coming to the end of this week, but how would you position come tomorrow, whether or not, which stocks you would have an eye out for?
I think sectorally, definitely banking is on my radar. I mean, I'm going to look at heavyweights, as I was pointing out, NSBI and HDFC Bank. These are stocks I'm going to be eyeing out from a positive stance. My worries continue to remain within the auto space. My worries continue to remain within technology. Both these sectors are not able to break out. They're not getting out of the woods. So I think those are gray areas for me. And preparedness on the downside should really be there if 11,450 breaks down on the Nifty. So as I was pointing out, if 30,200 on the bank Nifty breaks or 11,450 on the Nifty spot breaks, these should be red flags. These should be signals that the market will probably drift lower. Unless that happens, one should kind of maintain status quo and one should continue the trot up and clearly focus within the banking space if I was to pick one sector.
Okay. Rahul, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate you taking out the time. All right, and with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Countdown from Navdeep myself. Thanks so very much for watching, and the market wrap is coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.